Beneath the weathered slopes of Mount Li, in the heartland of ancient China, lies something that has never been seen by human eyes. Not the terracotta warriors. Those 8,000 clay soldiers, perfectly preserved and world-famous, standing in their neat rows guarding an emperor's afterlife. Everyone knows about them. Museums display them. Documentaries film them. Tourists photograph them. But here's what most people don't understand. The Terracotta Army was never meant to be the main event. It's a distraction. A magnificent, awe-inspiring shell surrounding something far larger, far stranger, and deliberately hidden beneath hundreds of feet of earth. For over 2,000 years, the true tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of unified China, has remained sealed, untouched, unknown, and the more we learn about what might be down there, the more terrifying the decision becomes. Do we open it, or do we leave some mysteries buried? The warriors were discovered by accident in 1974. Farmers digging a well near Xi'an hit something hard. Not rock, not clay, terracotta. They kept digging and found a face, then an arm, then another figure, and another. Within weeks, archaeologists realized they'd stumbled onto one of the most significant archaeological finds in history. Thousands of life-size soldiers, each one unique, arranged in battle formation. Infantry, cavalry, archers, generals. An entire army frozen in clay, buried for over 2 millennia. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Individual facial features, detailed armor, weapons that had somehow survived intact. It was stunning, unprecedented, and as excavation continued, the scale became clear. Not just one pit, but several. Not just soldiers, but horses, chariots, acrobats, musicians. An entire imperial court recreated in terracotta. The world was amazed. China had uncovered a treasure beyond measure. But the archaeologists knew something the public didn't. This wasn't the tomb. This was just the perimeter, the outer defense. Because a quarter-mile away, rising like a man-made mountain from the valley floor, sat the actual burial mound. And beneath it, according to ancient texts and modern technology both, lay something no one had ever excavated. Something that might be the greatest archaeological discovery in human history. Or the most dangerous mistake we could possibly make. Qin Shi Huang wasn't just another emperor. He was the emperor. The man who unified China, who standardized currency and writing, who built the first version of the Great Wall. He conquered 6 rival kingdoms and forged them into a single nation. He ruled with absolute authority, burning books that questioned him, burying scholars alive who disagreed, reshaping an entire civilization according to his vision. But for all his power, for all his accomplishments, Qin Shi Huang was terrified of one thing: death. Ancient records describe an emperor obsessed with immortality. He sent expeditions to mythical islands searching for the elixir of eternal life. He consumed mercury-based potions, believing they would extend his years. He consulted alchemists, shamans, and mystics, anyone who claimed knowledge of how to cheat death. And when it became clear that immortality in life was impossible, he turned his attention to immortality in death. His tomb, according to the historical texts, wasn't designed as a resting place. It was designed as a continuation. A palace underground where he could rule forever, surrounded by everything he'd need to maintain his power in the afterlife. Not a grave, but a subterranean empire. And if the ancient accounts are accurate, what lies beneath Mount Li is beyond anything we've ever excavated. The records of the Grand Historian, written by Sima Qian about a century after the emperor's death, describe the tomb in detail. Not as myth or legend, but as documented fact. According to Sima Qian, the tomb complex is enormous. Palaces, towers, administrative buildings, storehouses filled with treasures. An entire capital city recreated underground, with walls, gates, and defensive structures. The ceiling was painted to resemble the night sky, with constellations mapped in pearls. The floor depicted the geography of China, with rivers and seas flowing in perpetual motion. And at the center of it all, in a bronze coffin sealed within multiple chambers, lay the emperor himself, surrounded by everything he'd accumulated in life, protected by traps so sophisticated they'd kill any intruder who dared enter. For centuries, historians dismissed this as exaggeration. Ancient writers loved hyperbole. They described monuments as larger than life to honor their subjects. The tomb was probably significant, sure, but a complete underground city, rivers that flowed, automatic crossbows, That sounded like fantasy. But then modern science got involved. And everything changed. The part about the rivers caught everyone's attention. Sima Qian claimed that liquid mercury was used to simulate the rivers and seas of China, flowing endlessly through mechanical channels. Mercury, a substance so toxic that exposure causes tremors, madness, organ failure, and death. The idea that someone would fill an underground tomb with tons of mercury seemed absurd, impossible, until soil samples were taken. Archaeologists drilled test holes around the burial mound and analyzed the earth. The results were disturbing. Mercury levels in the soil were extraordinarily high. Not just above normal, hundreds of times higher than naturally occurring background levels. And the distribution wasn't random. The highest concentrations matched the locations where ancient texts said the rivers and seas would be. Meaning someone, over 2,000 years ago, did exactly what the records claimed. They brought tons of mercury, refined it, and used it to create flowing waterways beneath the earth. Why? The official explanation is preservation. Mercury vapor is toxic to bacteria, insects, anything biological. A tomb sealed with mercury would remain pristine for millennia. No decay, no decomposition. Everything inside frozen in time. But there's another possibility, one that ancient Chinese texts hint at. Mercury was believed to grant immortality. The emperor consumed it in life. Maybe he wanted to be surrounded by it in death. An eternal bath in the substance he thought would make him a god. Either way, the mercury is there, confirmed, measurable, and it presents a massive problem. Because if the tomb is opened, all that mercury, sealed for over 2,000 years, will vaporize. Anyone inside will be poisoned within minutes. Any organic material, silk, wood, even human remains, will decay upon exposure to oxygen. Opening the tomb could destroy everything we're trying to preserve. But the mercury isn't the only danger. Ancient texts describe defensive mechanisms built into the tomb. Crossbows rigged to fire automatically at intruders. Chambers designed to collapse if the wrong passage is entered. Sealed corridors filled with traps that would kill anyone foolish enough to try grave robbing. For a long time, archaeologists assumed this was mythology. A way to scare potential thieves. After all, how could ancient engineers create automatic weapons? But then excavations in other parts of the complex revealed something unsettling. Mechanisms, bronze triggers, stone counterweights, evidence of sophisticated engineering far beyond what most people assume ancient China was capable of. The terracotta warriors themselves were originally armed. Real bronze weapons, swords and spears and arrowheads, placed in their clay hands. Most of these weapons were looted long ago, but a few survived. And when analyzed, they showed something remarkable. The bronze had been treated with chromium, a preservation technique that wasn't rediscovered in the West until the 1900s. Swords over 2,000 years old that were still sharp, still balanced, still deadly. If the ancient engineers could do that, if they had access to metallurgy and chemistry advanced enough to create rust-proof weapons, then maybe the trap systems weren't mythology either. Maybe the tomb really is rigged to kill. And that raises an uncomfortable question. How many of those traps are still functional? How many chambers are still sealed, waiting? Opening the tomb isn't just an archaeological challenge. It's a gamble with human lives. Here's where it gets frustrating. We know what's down there. Ground-penetrating radar has mapped the tomb complex. It's massive. The central chamber alone is estimated to be the size of a football field, buried under a man-made mountain of compacted earth. Satellite imaging shows anomalies. Chemical analysis confirms the mercury. Seismic surveys reveal walls, passages, intact buildings. We can see it without opening it. And yet, we can't go in. Not won't. Can't. Because once the tomb is opened, there's no closing it again. Oxygen floods the chambers. Organic materials decay. Mercury vaporizes into toxic clouds, and traps trigger. If anything goes wrong, if a chamber collapses or floods, we lose everything. Not just artifacts, but information. The layout, the inscriptions, the context that tells us what it meant. You only get one chance at this. One. And Chinese authorities, along with international archaeological organizations, have made a decision. They're leaving it closed. Deliberately. Until technology advances to the point where excavation can be done safely, the tomb will remain sealed. This isn't a matter of funding. China has the money. This isn't a matter of interest. The whole world wants to know what's inside. This is a matter of irreversible consequences. Other tombs have been opened and regretted. The tomb of Tutankhamun in Egypt, discovered in 1922, was excavated with the best techniques available at the time. But even so, damage occurred. The vibrant blues and golds painted on wooden furniture began fading within hours of exposure to air. Paint flaked off walls, organic materials crumbled, and that was a relatively small tomb, well preserved and dry. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang is exponentially larger, filled with mercury, possibly booby-trapped, and buried under a mountain of earth. One mistake and it's gone. Not damaged. Gone. That's why, despite decades of public pressure and scientific curiosity, excavation hasn't begun. Because the people who make these decisions understand what's at stake. This isn't just the tomb of an emperor, it's a time capsule. A snapshot of a moment in history when China was unified for the first time, when one man commanded enough power to build an underground empire, when technology and ambition combined to create something that has never been replicated. And that time capsule has survived, intact, for over 2,000 years. Breaking the seal to satisfy curiosity would be the ultimate act of archaeological vandalism. So they wait, and the tomb sits, silent, sealed, untouched. But the waiting is torture. Because we know. We know there's something down there. Something extraordinary. Treasures, certainly. Ancient texts mention gold, jade, precious stones beyond count. But it's not the treasure that drives archaeologists crazy, it's the information. Inscriptions that could rewrite our understanding of early Chinese history. Artifacts that could reveal lost technologies. Art and architecture that could show us how the ancient world really looked. Not through fragments and ruins, but complete and intact. Libraries, maybe. Scrolls. Records. The things Qin Shi Huang burned above ground might have been preserved below. If the tomb contains written materials, and if they've survived the mercury and the millennia, we could recover lost knowledge, lost philosophies, lost sciences. Or we could find nothing. Empty chambers, looted passages, evidence that grave robbers breached the tomb centuries ago and stripped it bare. The historical records mention that after Qin Shi Huang died, a civil war erupted. His dynasty collapsed within years. Rebel forces captured the capital, and there are accounts of the tomb being entered and plundered. But the accounts are vague. Some say the treasures were taken. Others say the tomb's defenses killed the intruders. No one knows for sure. And that uncertainty is what makes the decision so agonizing. We might be protecting the archaeological find of the millennium, or we might be guarding an empty vault, and the only way to know is to open it, which we can't do. Not yet. For over 2,000 years, the central tomb chamber has remained sealed. No photographs, no eyewitness accounts from anyone who's been inside and survived. Just texts written a century after the emperor's death, describing something no living person had seen. Just measurements and surveys done with instruments that can peer beneath the earth but not reveal details. Just speculation, theories, and the maddening knowledge that the answer is right there, buried under Mount Li, waiting. Some nights, archaeologists stand on top of the burial mound and look out across the valley. They know what's beneath their feet. Palaces, chambers, rivers of mercury flowing through bronze channels. An emperor's body, wrapped in jade, surrounded by everything he believed would sustain him in the afterlife. And possibly traps, still armed, still waiting for someone to make a mistake. They know all of this. And they can't touch it. Because opening the tomb without the right technology would destroy it. And destroying it would be worse than never knowing. That's the choice. Live with mystery or risk annihilation. And so far, mystery has won. There's something profound about that decision. We live in an age where information is immediate, where satellites map every inch of the planet, where we've sent probes to other worlds and sequenced the human genome. We're used to knowing, used to accessing, used to the idea that if something exists, we can study it. But here, beneath a mountain in central China, is a place we've chosen not to enter. Not because we can't find it, not because we lack the tools to dig, but because we're exercising restraint. Recognizing that some things are too valuable to risk. That patience, in archaeology, is more important than discovery. That preserving the unknown is sometimes wiser than revealing it prematurely. The Qin Emperor's tomb has become a symbol, not just of ancient China's power, but of modern humility. A reminder that knowledge has a cost, that opening doors can't be undone, and that sometimes The best decision is to leave something buried until we're truly ready to handle what we find. But here's the thing. Every year, technology improves. Ground-penetrating radar gets more precise. Remote sensing becomes more sophisticated. Materials science advances to the point where we might, someday, be able to excavate the tomb safely, robotic systems that can enter sealed chambers without exposing them to oxygen. Chemical treatments that could stabilize organic materials the moment they're uncovered. Atmospheric controls that could manage the mercury vapor without risking human lives. These technologies exist in early forms. In a decade, maybe two, they might be refined enough to use, and when that day comes, the decision will have to be made again. Do we open it? Do we finally see what Qin Shi Huang built in his obsession with immortality? Or do we decide that some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries? That the power of the unknown is greater than the satisfaction of knowing? Right now, we're living in a rare moment in history. A moment where something incredible exists, where we know where it is, and where we've collectively agreed to leave it alone. How long will that restraint last? How long can it last? Because the tomb isn't going anywhere. It's been there for over 2,000 years. It'll be there for 2,000 more. The earth will keep it. The mercury will preserve it. And the emperor, if his obsession with immortality had any truth to it, will continue his rule in the darkness beneath Mount Li. Waiting. Eternally waiting. For the day someone finally breaks the seal. The Terracotta Army, magnificent as it is, was never the point. It was the outer guard. The first line of defense. A statement to the world that said, if this is what we put on the perimeter, imagine what we've hidden at the center. And that challenge, that dare, has hung over archaeology for decades. We've imagined, we've theorized, we've measured and scanned and analyzed, but we haven't looked. And maybe that's the most human decision we've ever made, to know something exists and choose not to touch it, to value preservation over curiosity, to accept that some answers are worth waiting for, even if the wait lasts another 1,000 years. The tomb sits beneath Mount Li, silent, sealed, untouched. And in that silence, there's a kind of power. The power of the unknown, the weight of mystery, the understanding that some secrets are too important to rush. We'll open it someday, when we're ready, when the technology is right, when the risk is minimized and the reward is guaranteed. But until then, the emperor rests, surrounded by his mercury rivers and his clay army, alone in the dark, waiting for the moment when the world is finally ready to see what he built. And maybe, just maybe, that moment should never come. Because once you open a door like that, you can never close it again. And some doors are meant to stay shut. Tonight, somewhere beneath a mountain in China, there's a chamber no one has entered for over 2,000 years. Inside, there might be treasures beyond imagination. Or there might be nothing but dust and bones and empty halls. We don't know. We might never know. And that's okay. Because the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, sealed and silent and surrounded by 8,000 clay soldiers, has become more than an archaeological site. It's become a test of patience, of wisdom, of our ability to recognize that not everything should be uncovered. That mystery, sometimes, is more valuable than knowledge. That the greatest discoveries aren't always the ones we make, but the ones we choose to protect. The emperor wanted immortality. He consumed mercury, built an underground empire, surrounded himself with an army that would never age or die. And in a strange way, he succeeded. Not because his body will last forever, though it might, but because his tomb, his monument, his obsession, has become eternal. It exists. We know it's there. And as long as it remains sealed, as long as we choose not to open it, the mystery lives. The emperor's immortality isn't in his bones. It's in our restraint, in our decision to let him rest, to leave the door closed, to honor the unknown. And maybe that's the greatest tribute we could ever give. Not excavation, not discovery, but the wisdom to know when to stop digging and let the past keep its secrets. Sleep well, Emperor. Your tomb is safe. For now,